"Yes, a storm is approaching."
"Are the brethren satisfied?"
asked the bodymaster. There was a general murmur of assent.
"We know, brother, by your sign and by your countersign, that you are indeed one of us," said McGinty. "We would have you know, however, that in this county and in other counties of these parts we have certain rights, and also certain duties of our own which call for good men. Are you ready to be tested?"
"I am."
"Are you of stout heart?"
"I am."
"Take a stride forward to prove it."
As the words were said, he felt two hard points in front of his eyes pressing upon them, so that it appeared as if he could not move forward without a danger of losing them. None the less, he nerved himself to step resolutely out, and as he did so the pressure melted away. There was a low murmur of applause.
"He is of a stout heart," said the voice. "Can you bear pain?"
"As well as another," he answered.
"Test him."
It was all he could do to keep himself from screaming out, for an agonizing pain shot through his forearm. He nearly fainted at the sudden shock of it, but he bit his lip and clenched his hands to hide his agony. "I can take more than that," said he. This time there was loud applause. A finer first appearance had never been made in the lodge. Hands clapped him on the back, and the hood was plucked from his head. He stood blinking and smiling amid the congratulations of the brothers.
"One last word, Brother McMurdo," said McGinty. "You have already sworn the oath of secrecy and fidelity, and you are aware that the punishment for any breach of it is instant and inevitable death."
"I am," said McMurdo.
"And you accept the rule of the bodymaster, for the time being, under all circumstances?"
"I do."
"Then, in the name of Lodge 341 Vermissa, I welcome you to its privileges and debates. You will put the liquor on the table, Brother Scanlon, and we will drink to our worthy brother."
McMurdo's coat had been brought to him, but before putting it on he examined his right arm, which still smarted heavily. There on the flesh of the forearm was a circle with a triangle within it, deep and red as the branding iron had left it. One of the two of his neighbours pulled up their sleeves and showed their own lodge marks.
"We've all had it," said one, "but not all as brave as you over it."
"Tut, it was nothing," said he, but it burned and ached all the same. When the drinks which followed the ceremony of initiation had all been disposed of, the business of the lodge proceeded. McMurdo, accustomed only to the prosaic performances of Chicago, listened with open ears and more surprise than he ventured to show to what followed.
"The first business on the agenda paper," said McGinty, "is to read the following letter from Division Master Windle of Merton County Lodge 249. He says, 'Dear Sir, there is a job to be done on Andrew Ray, of Ray and Sturmish, coal owners near this place. You will remember that your lodge owes us a return, having had the service of two brethren in the matter of the patrolman last fall. You will send 2 good men. They will be taken charge of by Treasurer Higgins of this lodge, whose address you know. He will show them when to act and where. Yours in freedom, J. W. Windle, D.M.A.O.F. Windle has never refused us when we have had occasion to ask for the loan of a man or two, and it's not for us to refuse him."
McGinty paused and looked round the room with his dull, malevolent eyes.
"Who will volunteer for the job?"
Several young fellows held up their hands. The bodymaster looked at them with an approving smile.
"You'll do, Tiger Cormac. If you handle it as well as you did the last, you won't be wrong. And you, Wilson."
"I've no pistol." said the volunteer, a mere boy in his teens.
"It's your first, is it not? Well, you have to be blooded sometime. It'll be a great start for you. As to the pistol, you'll find it waiting for you, or I'm mistaken. If you report yourselves on Monday, it'll be time enough. You'll get a great welcome when you return."
"Any reward this time?" asked Cormac, a thick-set, dark-faced, brutal-looking young man whose ferocity had earned him the nickname of Tiger.
"Never mind the reward. You just do it for the honour of the thing. Maybe when it's done there'll be a few odd dollars at the bottom of the box."
"What has the man done?" asked the young Wilson.
"Sure it's not for the likes of you to ask what the man has done. He's been judged over there. That's no business of ours. All we have to do is to carry it out for them, same as they would for us. Speaking of that, 2 brothers from the Merton Lodge are coming over to us next week to do some business in this quarter."
"Who are they?" asked someone.
"Faith, it is wiser not to ask. If you know nothing, you can testify nothing, and no trouble can come of it. But they are men who will make a clean job when they're about it."
"And time, too," cried Ted Baldwin. "Folk are getting out of hand in these parts. It was only last week that 3 of our men were turned off by Foreman Blaker. It's been owing him a long time, and he'll get it full and proper." "Get what?" McMurdo whispered to his neighbour.
"The business end of a buckshot cartridge," cried the man with a loud laugh. "What think you of our ways, brother?"
McMurdo's criminal soul seemed to have already absorbed the spirit of the vile association of which he was now a member. "I like it well," said he. "'Tis a proper place for a lad of mettle." Several of those who sat around heard his words and applauded them.
"What's that?" cried the black-maned bodymaster from the end of the table.
"'Tis our new brother, sir, who finds our ways to his taste." McMurdo rose to his feet for an instant. "I would say, eminent bodymaster, that if a man should be wanted, I should take it as an honour to be chosen to help the lodge." There was great applause at this. It was felt that a new sun was pushing its rim above the horizon. To some of the elders it seemed that the progress was a little too rapid. "I would move," said the Secretary Harraway, a vulture-faced old greybeard who sat near the chairman, "that Brother McMurdo should wait until it is the good pleasure of the lodge to employ him." "Sure, that was what I meant. I'm in your hands," said McMurdo.
"Your time will come, brother," said the chairman. "We have marked you down as a willing man, and we believe that you will do good work in these parts. There is a small matter tonight in which you may take a hand, if it so please you."
"I'll wait for something that is worth while."
"You can come tonight anyhow, and it will help you to know what we stand for in this community. I will make the announcement later. Meanwhile," he glanced at his agenda paper, "I have 1 or 2 more points to bring before the meeting. First of all, I will ask the treasurer as to our bank balance. There is the pension to Jim Carnaway's widow. He was struck down during the work of the lodge, and it is for us to see that she is not the loser.
Jim was shot last month when they tried to kill Chester Wilcox of Marley Creek," McMurdo's neighbour informed him.
"The funds are good at the moment," said the treasurer with the bank book in front of him.
"The firms have been generous of late. Max Linder and Co. paid $500 to be left alone. Walker Brothers sent in $100, but I took it on myself to return it and ask for $5. If I do not hear by Wednesday, their winding gear may get out of order. We had to burn their breaker last year before they became reasonable. Then the West Section Coaling Company has paid its annual contribution. We have enough on hand to meet any obligations." "What about Archie Swindon?" asked a brother. "He has sold out and left the district. The old devil left a note for us to say that he'd had rather be a free crossing sweeper in a New York than a large mine owner under the power of a ring of blackmailers.
By gar, it was as well that he made a break for it before the note reached us. I guess he won't show his face in this valley again."
An elderly, clean-shaved man with a kindly face and a good brow rose from the end of the table which faced the chairman.
"Mr. Treasurer," he asked, "may I ask who has bought the property of this man that we have driven out of the district?"
"Yes, Brother Morris. It has been bought by the State and Merton County Railroad Company."
"And who bought the mines of Todman and of Lee that came into the market in the same way last year?"
"The same company, Brother Morris."
"And who bought the ironworks of Manson and of Schumann and of Vandeer and of Atwood, which have all been given up of late?"
"They were all bought by the West Gilmerton General Mining Company."
"I don't see, Brother Morris," said the chairman, "that it matters to us who buys them, since they can't carry them out of the district."
"With all respect to you, eminent bodymaster, I think it may matter very much to us. This process has been going on now for 10 long years. We are gradually driving all the small men out of trade. What is the result? We find in their places great companies like the railroad or the General Iron, who have their directors in New York or Philadelphia, and care nothing for our threats. We can take it out of their local bosses, but it only means that others will be sent in their stead, and we are making it dangerous for ourselves. The small men could not harm us. They had not the money nor the power. So long as we did not squeeze them too dry, they would stay on under our power. But if these big companies find that we stand between them and their profits, they will spare no pains and no expense to hunt us down and bring us to court." There was a hush at these ominous words, and every face darkened as gloomy looks were exchanged. So omnipotent and unchallenged had they been, that the very thought that there was possible retribution in the background had been banished from their minds, and yet the idea struck a chill to the most reckless of them. "It is my advice," the speaker continued, "that we go easier upon the small men. On the day that they have all been driven out, the power of this society will have been broken." Unwelcome truths are not popular. There were angry cries as the speaker resumed his seat. McGinty rose with gloom upon his brow.
"Brother Morris," said he, "you were always a croaker. So long as the members of this lodge stand together, there is no power in the United States that can touch them. Sure, have we not tried it often enough in the law courts? I expect the big companies will find it easier to pay than to fight, same as the little companies do. And now, brethren," McGinty took off his black velvet cap and his stole as he spoke, "this lodge has finished its business for the evening, save for one small matter which may be mentioned when we are parting. The time has now come for fraternal refreshment and for harmony."
Strange indeed is human nature. Here were these men, to whom murder was familiar, who again and again had struck down the father of the family, some man against whom they had no personal feeling, without one thought of compunction or of compassion for his weeping wife or helpless children, and yet the tender or pathetic in music could move them to tears. McMurdo had a fine tenor voice, and if he had failed to gain the goodwill of the lodge before, it could no longer have been withheld after he had thrilled them with "I am sitting on the stile Mary" and "On the banks of Allan Water." In his very first night the new recruit had made himself one of the most popular of the brethren, marked already for advancement and high office. There were other qualities needed, however, besides those of good fellowship, to make a worthy freeman, and of these he was given an example before the evening was over. The whisky bottle had passed round many times, and the men were flushed and ripe for mischief when their bodymaster rose once more to address them.
"Boys," said he, "there's one man in this town that wants trimming up, and it's for you to see that he gets it. I'm speaking of James Stanger of the Herald. You seen how he's been opening his mouth against us again?"
There was a murmur of assent, with many a muttered oath. McGinty took a slip of paper from his waistcoat pocket.
"Law and order."
That's how he heads it.
"Reign of terror in the coal and iron district. 12 years have now elapsed since the first assassinations which prove the existence of a criminal organization in our midst. From that day these outrages have never ceased, until now they have reached a pitch which makes us the opprobrium of the civilized world. Is it for such results as this that our great country welcomes to its bosom the alien who flies from the despotisms of Europe? Is it that they shall themselves become tyrants over the very men who have given them shelter, and that a state of terrorism and lawlessness should be established under the very shadow of the sacred folds of the starry flag of freedom, which would raise horror in our minds if we read of it as existing under the most effete monarchy of the East? The men are known. The organization is patent and public. How long are we to endure it? Can we forever live?" "Sure, I've read enough of the slush,"
cried the chairman, tossing the paper down upon the table.
"That's what he says of us. The question I'm asking is, what shall we say to him?"
"Kill him!" cried a dozen fierce voices. "I protest against that," said Brother Morris, the man of the good brow and shaved face. "I tell you, brethren, that our hand is too heavy in this valley, and that there will come a point where in self-defence every man will unite to crush us out. James Stanger is an old man. He is respected in the township and the district. His paper stands for all that is solid in the valley. If that man is struck down, there will be a stir through this state that will only end with our destruction."
"And how would they bring about our destruction, Mr. Standback?" cried McGinty. "Is it by the police? Sure, half of them are in our pay, and half of them are afraid of us. Or is it by the law courts and the judge? Haven't we tried that before now, and whatever came of it?"
"There is a Judge Lynch that might try the case," said Brother Morris. A general shout of anger greeted the suggestion.
"I have but to raise my finger," cried McGinty, "and I could put 200 men into this town that would clear it out from end to end."
Then suddenly raising his voice and bending his huge black brows into a terrible frown,
"See here, Brother Morris, I have my eye on you, and have had for some time. You've no heart yourself, and you try to take the heart out of others. It will be an ill day for you, Brother Morris, when your own name comes on our agenda paper, and I'm thinking that it's just there that I ought to place it."
Morris had turned deadly pale, and his knees seemed to give way under him as he fell back into his chair. He raised his glass in his trembling hand, and drank before he could answer. "I apologize, eminent bodymaster, to you and to every brother in this lodge, if I have said more than I should. I am a faithful member. You all know that. And it is my fear lest evil come to the lodge which makes me speak in anxious words. But I have greater trust in your judgment than in my own, eminent bodymaster, and I promise you that I will not offend again." The bodymaster's scowl relaxed as he listened to the humble words.
"Very good, Brother Morris. It's myself that would be sorry if it were needful to give you a lesson. But so long as I am in this chair, we shall be a united lodge in word and in deed. And now, boys," he continued, looking round at the company, "I'll say this much, that if Stanger got his full deserts there would be more trouble than we need ask for. These editors hang together, and every journal in the state would be crying out for police and troops. But I guess you can give him a pretty severe warning. Will you fix it, Brother Baldwin?"
"Sure," said the young man eagerly.
"How many will you take?"
"Half a dozen, and 2 to guard the door. You'll come, Gower, and you, Mansell,
and you Scanlon, and the 2 Willoughbys." "I promised the new brother he should go," said the chairman.
Ted Baldwin looked at McMurdo with eyes which showed that he had not forgotten nor forgiven. "Well, he can come if he wants," he said in a surly voice. "That's enough. The sooner we get to work the better." The company broke up with shouts and yells and snatches of drunken song. The bar was still crowded with revellers, and many of the brethren remained there. The little band who had been told off for duty passed out into the street, proceeding in 2s and 3s along the sidewalk so as not to provoke attention. It was a bitterly cold night, with a half-moon shining brilliantly in a frosty, star-spangled sky. The men stopped and gathered in a yard which faced a high building. The words "Vermissa Herald" were printed in gold lettering between the brightly lit windows. From within came the clanking of the printing press. "Here you," said Baldwin to McMurdo. "You can stand below at the door and see that the road is kept open for us. Arthur Willoughby can stay with you. You others come with me. Have no fears, boys, for we have a dozen witnesses that we are in the Union Bar at this very moment." It was nearly midnight, and the street was deserted save for 1 or 2 revellers upon their way home. The party crossed the road, and, pushing open the door of the newspaper office, Baldwin and his men rushed in and up the stair which faced them. McMurdo and another remained below. From the room above came a shout, a cry for help, and then the sound of trampling feet and of falling chairs. An instant later a grey-haired man rushed out on the landing. He was seized before he could get farther, and his spectacles came tinkling down to McMurdo's feet. There was a thud and a groan. He was on his face, and 6 sticks were clattering together as they fell upon him. He writhed, and his long thin limbs quivered under the blows. The others ceased at last, but Baldwin, his cruel face set in an infernal smile, was hacking at the man's head, which he vainly endeavoured to defend with his arms. His white hair was dabbled with patches of blood. Baldwin was still stooping over his victim, putting in a short vicious blow whenever he could see a part exposed, when McMurdo dashed up the stair and pushed him back. "You'll kill the man," said he. "Drop it." Baldwin looked at him in amazement. "Curse you!" he cried. "Who are you to interfere? You that are new to the lodge. Stand back." He raised his stick, but McMurdo had whipped his pistol out of his pocket. "Stand back yourself," he cried. "I'll blow your face in if you lay a hand on me. As to the lodge, wasn't it the order of the bodymaster that the man was not to be killed? And what are you doing but killing him?" "It's truth he says," remarked one of the men. "By gar, you'd best hurry yourselves," cried the man below. "The windows are all lighting up, and you'll have the whole town here inside of 5 minutes." There was indeed the sound of shouting in the street, and a little group of compositors and pressmen was forming in the hall below, and nerving itself to action. Leaving the limp and motionless body of the editor at the head of the stair, the criminals rushed down and made their way swiftly along the street. Having reached the Union House, some of them, mixed with the crowd in McGinty's saloon, whispering across the bar to the boss that the job had been well carried through. Others, and among them McMurdo, broke away into side streets, and so by devious paths to their own homes. End of Chapter 3. Part 2, Chapter 4 of The Valley of Fear by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 4. The Valley of Fear. When McMurdo awoke next morning, he had good reason to remember his initiation into the lodge. His head ached with the effect of the drink, and his arm, where he had been branded, was hot and swollen. Having his own peculiar source of income, he was irregular in his attendance at his work, so he had a late breakfast, and remained at home for the morning writing a long letter to a friend. Afterwards he read the Daily Herald. In a special column, put in at the last moment, he read, "Outrage at the Herald office. Editor seriously injured." It was a short account of the facts with which he was himself more familiar than the writer could have been. It ended with the statement, "The matter is now in the hands of the police, but it can hardly be hoped that their exertions will be attended by any better results than in the past. Some of the men were recognised, and there is hope that a conviction may be obtained. The source of the outrage was, it need hardly be said, that infamous society which has held this community in bondage for so long a period, and against which the Herald has taken so uncompromising a stand. Mr. Stanger's many friends will rejoice to hear that, though he has been cruelly and brutally beaten, and though he has sustained severe injuries about the head, there is no immediate danger to his life." Below it stated that a guard of police, armed with Winchester rifles, had been requisitioned for the defence of the office. McMurdo had laid down the paper and was lighting his pipe with a hand which was shaky from the excesses of the previous evening, when there was a knock outside, and his landlady brought to him a note which had just been handed in by a lad. It was unsigned, and ran thus: "I should wish to speak to you, but would rather not do so in your house. You will find me beside the flagstaff upon Miller Hill. If you will come there now, I have something which is important for you to hear and for me to say." McMurdo read the note twice with the utmost surprise, for he could not imagine what it meant, or who was the author of it. Had it been in a feminine hand, he might have imagined that it was the beginning of one of those adventures which had been familiar enough in his past life. But it was the writing of a man, and of a well-educated one too. Finally, after some hesitation, he determined to see the matter through. Miller Hill is an ill-kept public park in the very centre of the town. In summer it is a favourite resort of the people, but in the winter it is desolate enough. From the top of it one has a view, not only of the whole straggling, grimy town, but of the winding valley beneath, with its scattered mines and factories blackening the snow on each side of it, and of the wooded and white-capped ranges flanking it. McMurdo strolled up the winding path, hedged in with evergreens, until he reached the deserted restaurant which forms the centre of summer gaiety. Beside it was a bare flagstaff, and underneath it a man, his hat drawn down and the collar of his overcoat turned up. When he turned his face, McMurdo saw that it was Brother Morris, he who had incurred the anger of the bodymaster the night before. The lodge sign was given and exchanged as they met. "I want to have a word with you, Mr. McMurdo," said the older man, speaking with a hesitation which showed that he was on delicate ground. "It was kind enough of you to come." "Why did you not put your name to the note?" "One has to be cautious, mister. One never knows in times like these how a thing may come back to one. One never knows either who to trust or who not to trust." "Surely one may trust brothers of the lodge." "No, no, not always," cried Morris with vehemence. "Whatever we say, even what we think, seems to get back to that man McGinty." "Look here," said McMurdo sternly. "It was only last night, as you know well, that I swore good faith to our bodymaster. Would you be asking me to break my oath?" "If that is the view you take," said Morris sadly, "I can only say that I am sorry I gave you the trouble to come and meet me. Things have come to a bad pass when two free citizens cannot speak their thoughts to each other." McMurdo, who had been watching his companion very narrowly, relaxed somewhat in his bearing. "Sure I spoke for myself only," said he. "I am a newcomer, as you know, and I am strange to it all. It is not for me to open my mouth, Mr. Morris, and if you think well to say anything to me, I am here to hear it." "And to take it back to Boss McGinty?" said Morris bitterly. "Indeed, then, you do me injustice there," cried McMurdo. "For myself, I am loyal to the lodge, and so I tell you straight, but I would be a poor creature if I were to repeat to any other what you might say to me in confidence. It'll go no further than me, though I warn you that you may get neither help nor sympathy." "I have given up looking for either the one or the other," said Morris. "I may be putting my very life in your hands by what I say, but, bad as you are, and it seemed to me last night that you were shaping to be as bad as the worst. Still, you are new to it, and your conscience cannot yet be as hardened as theirs. That was why I thought to speak with you." "Well, what have you to say?" "If you give me away, may a curse be on you." "Sure, I said I would not." "I would ask you then, when you joined the Freemen's Society in Chicago and swore vows of charity and fidelity, did ever it cross your mind that you might find it would lead you to crime?" "If you call it crime," McMurdo answered. "Call it crime!" cried Morris, his voice vibrating with passion. "You have seen little of it, if you can call it anything else. Was it crime last night, when a man old enough to be your father was beaten till the blood dripped from his white hairs? Was that crime, or what else would you call it?" "There are some would say it was war," said McMurdo. "A war of two classes, with all in, so that each struck as best it could." "Well, did you think of such a thing when you joined the Freemen's Society at Chicago?" "No, I'm bound to say I did not." "Nor did I, when I joined it at Philadelphia. It was just a benefit club and a meeting place for one's fellows. Then I heard of this place. Curse the hour that the name first fell upon my ears. And I came to better myself. My God, to better myself! My wife and 3 children came with me. I started a dry goods store on Market Square, and I prospered well. The word had gone round that I was a freeman, and I was forced to join the local lodge, same as you did last night. I've the badge of shame on my forearm, and something worse branded on my heart. I found that I was under the orders of a black villain, and caught in a meshwork of crime. What could I do? Every word I said to make things better was taken as treason, same as it was last night. I can't get away, for all I have in the world is in my store. If I leave the society, I know well that it means murder to me, and God knows what to my wife and children. Oh, man, it is awful, awful!" He put his hands to his face, and his body shook with convulsive sobs. McMurdo shrugged his shoulders. "You are too soft for the job," said he. "You're the wrong sort for such work." "I had a conscience and a religion, but they made me a criminal among them. I was chosen for a job. If I backed down, I knew well what would come to me. Maybe I'm a coward. Maybe it's the thought of my poor little woman and the children that makes me one. Anyway, I went. I guess it will haunt me forever. It was a lonely house, 20 miles from here, over the range yonder. I was told off for the door, same as you were last night. They could not trust me with the job. The others went in. When they came out, their hands were crimson to the wrists. As we turned away, a child was screaming out of the house behind us. It was a boy of 5 who had seen his father murdered. I nearly fainted with the horror of it, and yet I had to keep a bold and smiling face, for well I knew that if I did not, it would be out of my house that they would come next with their bloody hands, and it would be my little Fred that would be screaming for his father. But I was a criminal then, part sharer in a murder, lost forever in this world, and lost also in the next. I am a good Catholic, but the priest would have no word with me when he heard I was a scourer, and I am excommunicated from my faith. That's how it stands with me, and I see you going down the same road, and I ask you what the end is to be. Are you ready to be a cold-blooded murderer also, or can we do anything to stop it?" "What would you do?" asked McMurdo abruptly. "You'd not inform?" "God forbid!" cried Morris. "Sure, the very thought would cost me my life." "That's well," said McMurdo. "I'm thinking that you're a weak man, and that you make too much of the matter." "Too much? Wait till you have lived here longer. Look down the valley. See the cloud of 100 chimneys that overshadows it. I tell you that the cloud of murder hangs thicker and lower than that over the heads of the people. It is the valley of fear, the valley of death, The terror is in the hearts of the people from the dusk to the dawn. Wait, young man, and you will learn for yourself." "Well, I'll let you know what I think when I have seen more," said McMurdo carelessly. "What is very clear is that you are not the man for the place, and that the sooner you sell out, if you only get a dime a dollar for what the business is worth, the better it'll be for you. What you've said is safe with me, but by gar, if I thought you were an informer—" "No, no!" cried Morris piteously. "Well, let it rest at that. I'll bear what you've said in mind, and maybe some day I'll come back to it. I expect you meant kindly by speaking to me like this. Now I'll be getting home." "One word before you go," said Morris. "We may have been seen together. They may want to know what we have spoken about." "Ah, that's well thought of." "I offer you a clerkship in my store." "And I refuse it. That's our business. Well, so long, Brother Morris, and may you find things go better with you in the future." That same afternoon, as McMurdo sat smoking, lost in thought beside the stove of his sitting-room, the door swung open and its framework was filled with the huge figure of Boss McGinty. He passed the sign, and then, seating himself opposite to the young man, he looked at him steadily for some time, a look which was as steadily returned.
"I'm not much of a visitor, Brother McMurdo," he said at last. "I guess I'm too busy over the folk that visit me. But I thought I'd stretch a point and drop down to see you in your own house."
"I'm proud to see you here, Councillor," McMurdo answered heartily, bringing his whisky bottle out of the cupboard. "It's an honour that I had not expected."
"How's the arm?" asked the boss.
McMurdo made a wry face. "Well, I'm not forgetting it," he said, "but it's worth it."
"Yes, it's worth it," the other answered, "to those that are loyal and go through with it and are a help to the lodge. What were you speaking to Brother Morris about on the Miller Hill this morning?"
The question came so suddenly that it was well that he had his answer prepared. He burst into a hearty laugh. "Morris didn't know I could earn a living here at home. He shan't know either, for he's got too much conscience for the likes of me. But he's a good-hearted old chap. It was his idea that I was at a loose end and that he would do me a good turn by offering me a clerkship in a dry goods store."
"Oh, that was it?"
"Yes, that was it."
"And you refused it?"
"Sure. Couldn't I earn 10 times as much in my own bedroom with 4 hours' work?"
"That's so. But I wouldn't get about too much with Morris."
"Why not?"
"Well, I guess because I tell you not. That's enough for most folk in these parts."
"It may be enough for most folk, but it ain't enough for me, Councillor," said McMurdo boldly. "If you're a judge of men, you'll know that." The swarthy giant glared at him, and his hairy paw closed for an instant round the glass as though he would hurl it at the head of his companion. Then he laughed in his loud, boisterous, insincere fashion.
"Ha! You're a queer card for sure," said he. "Well, if you want more reasons, I'll give them. Did Morris say nothing to you against the lodge?"
"No."
"Nor against me?"
"No."
"Well, that's because he don't trust you. But in his heart he's not a loyal brother. We know that well. So we watch him and we wait for the time to admonish him. I'm thinking that the time is drawing near. There's no room for scabby sheep in our pen. But if you keep company with a disloyal man, we might think that you were disloyal too, see?"
"There's no chance of my keeping company with him, for I dislike the man," McMurdo answered. "As to being disloyal, if it was any man but you, he would not use the word to me twice."
"Well, that's enough," said McGinty, draining off his glass. "I came down to give you a word in season, and you've had it."
"I'd like to know," said McMurdo, "how you ever came to learn that I had spoken with Morris at all." McGinty laughed.
"It's my business to know what goes on in this township," said he. "I guess you'd best reckon on my hearing all that passes. Well, time's up, and I'll just say—"
but his leave-taking was cut short in a very unexpected fashion. With a sudden crash, the door flew open, and 3 frowning, intent faces glared in at them from under the peaks of police caps. McMurdo sprang to his feet and half drew his revolver, but his arm stopped midway as he became conscious that 2 Winchester rifles were levelled at his head. A man in uniform advanced into the room, a 6-shooter in his hand. It was Captain Marvin, one of Chicago and now of the Mine Constabulary. He shook his head with a half-smile at McMurdo. "I thought you'd be getting into trouble, Mr. Crooked McMurdo of Chicago," said he. "Can't keep out of it, can you? Take your hat and come along with us." "I guess you'll pay for this, Captain Marvin," said McGinty. "Who are you, I'd like to know, to break into a house in this fashion and molest honest, law-abiding men?" "You're standing out in this deal, Councillor McGinty," said the police captain. "We're not out after you, but after this man McMurdo. It is for you to help, not to hinder us in our duty." "He is a friend of mine, and I'll answer for his conduct," said the boss. "By all accounts, Mr. McGinty, you may have to answer for your own conduct some of these days," the captain answered. "This man McMurdo was a crook before ever he came here, and he's a crook still. Cover him, patrolman, while I disarm him." "There's my pistol," said McMurdo coolly. "Maybe, Captain Marvin, if you and I were alone and face to face, you would not take me so easily." "Where's your warrant?" asked McGinty. "By gar, a man might as well live in Russia as in Vermissa while folk like you are running the police. It's a capitalist outrage, and you'll hear more of it, I reckon." "You do what you think is your duty the best way you can, Councillor. We'll look after ours." "What am I accused of?" asked McMurdo. "Of being concerned in the beating of old Editor Stanger at the Herald office. It wasn't your fault that it isn't a murder charge." "Well, if that's all you have against him," cried McGinty with a laugh, "you can save yourself a deal of trouble by dropping it right now. This man was with me in my saloon playing poker up to midnight, and I can bring a dozen to prove it." "That's your affair, and I guess you can settle it in court tomorrow. Meanwhile, come on, McMurdo, and come quietly if you don't want a gun across your head. You stand wide, Mr. McGinty, for I warn you, I'll stand no resistance when I'm on duty." So determined was the appearance of the captain that both McMurdo and his boss were forced to accept the situation. The latter managed to have a few whispered words with the prisoner before they parted. "What about—" He jerked his thumb upward to signify the coining plant. "All right," whispered McMurdo, who had devised a safe hiding-place under the floor. "I'll bid you good-bye," said the boss, shaking hands. "I'll see Riley, the lawyer, and take the defence upon myself. Take my word for it that they won't be able to hold you." "I wouldn't bet on that. Guard the prisoner, you two, and shoot him if he tries any games. I'll search the house before I leave." He did so, but apparently found no trace of the concealed plant. When he descended, he and his men escorted McMurdo to headquarters. Darkness had fallen, and a keen blizzard was blowing so that the streets were nearly deserted, but a few loiterers followed the group, and, emboldened by invisibility, shouted imprecations at the prisoner. "Lynch the cursed scourer!" they cried. "Lynch him!" They laughed and jeered as he was pushed into the police station. After a short formal examination from the inspector in charge, he was put into the common cell. Here he found Baldwin and 3 other criminals of the night before, all arrested that afternoon and waiting their trial next morning. But even within this inner fortress of the law, the long arm of the freemen was able to extend. Late at night there came a jailer with a straw bundle for their bedding, out of which he extracted 2 bottles of whisky, some glasses, and a pack of cards. They spent a hilarious night without an anxious thought as to the ordeal of the morning. Nor had they cause, as the result was to show. The magistrate could not possibly on the evidence have held them for a higher court. On the one hand, the compositors and pressmen were forced to admit that the light was uncertain, that they were themselves much perturbed, and that it was difficult for them to swear to the identity of the assailants, although they believed that the accused were among them. Cross-examined by the clever attorney who had been engaged by McGinty, they were even more nebulous in their evidence. The injured man had already deposed that he was so taken by surprise by the suddenness of the attack that he could state nothing beyond the fact that the first man who struck him wore a moustache. He added that he knew them to be scourers, since no one else in the community could possibly have any enmity to him, and he had long been threatened on account of his outspoken editorials. On the other hand, it was clearly shown by the united and unfaltering evidence of 6 citizens, including that high municipal official, Councillor McGinty, that the men had been at a card party at the Union House until an hour very much later than the commission of the outrage. Needless to say that they were discharged with something very near to an apology from the bench for the inconvenience to which they had been put, together with an implied censure of Captain Marvin and the police for their officious zeal. The verdict was greeted with loud applause by a court in which McMurdo saw many familiar faces. Brothers of the lodge smiled and waved, but there were others who sat with compressed lips and brooding eyes as the men filed out of the dock. One of them, a little dark-bearded, resolute fellow, put the thoughts of himself and comrades into words as the ex-prisoners passed him. "You damned murderers," he said. "We'll fix you yet." End of Chapter 4. Part 2, Chapter 5 of The Valley of Fear by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5. The Darkest Hour. If anything had been needed to give an impetus to Jack McMurdo's popularity among his fellows, it would have been his arrest and acquittal. That a man on the very night of joining the lodge should have done something which brought him before the magistrate was a new record in the annals of the society. Already he had earned the reputation of a good boon companion, a cheery reveller, and withal a man of high temper, who would not take an insult even from the all-powerful boss himself. But in addition to this, he impressed his comrades with the idea that among them all there was not one whose brain was so ready to devise a bloodthirsty scheme, or whose hand would be more capable of carrying it out. "He'll be the boy for the clean job," said the oldsters to one another, and waited their time until they could set him to his work. McGinty had instruments enough already, but he recognized that this was a supremely able one. He felt like a man holding a fierce bloodhound in leash. There were curs to do the smaller work, but some day he would slip this creature upon its prey. A few members of the lodge, Ted Baldwin among them, resented the rapid rise of the stranger, and hated him for it, but they kept clear of him, for he was as ready to fight as to laugh. But if he gained favour with his fellows, there was another quarter, one which had become even more vital to him, in which he lost it. Etty Shafter's father would have nothing more to do with him, nor would he allow him to enter the house. Etty herself was too deeply in love to give him up altogether, and yet her own good sense warned her of what would come from a marriage with a man who was regarded as a criminal. One morning, after a sleepless night, she determined to see him, possibly for the last time, and made one strong endeavour to draw him from those evil influences which were sucking him down. She went to his house, as he had often begged her to do, and made her way into the room which he used as his sitting-room. He was seated at a table, with his back turned and a letter in front of him. A sudden spirit of girlish mischief came over her. She was still only 19. He had not heard her when she pushed open the door. Now she tiptoed forward and laid her hand lightly upon his bended shoulders. If she had expected to startle him, she certainly succeeded, but only in turn to be startled herself. With a tiger spring he turned on her, and his right hand was feeling for her throat. At the same instant, with the other hand, he crumpled up the paper that lay before him. For an instant he stood glaring. Then astonishment and joy took the place of the ferocity which had convulsed his features, a ferocity which had sent her shrinking back in horror as from something which had never before intruded into her gentle life. "It's you," said he, mopping his brow. "And to think that you should come to me, heart of my heart, and I should find nothing better to do than want to strangle you. Come then, darling," and he held out his arms. "Let me make it up to you." But she had not recovered from that sudden glimpse of guilty fear which she had read in the man's face. All her woman's instinct told her that it was not the mere fright of a man who is startled. Guilt. That was it. Guilt and fear. "What's come over you, Jack?" she cried. "Why are you so scared of me? Oh, Jack, if your conscience was at ease, you would not have looked at me like that." "Sure, I was thinking of other things, when you came tripping so lightly on those fairy feet of yours." "No, no, it was more than that, Jack." Then a sudden suspicion seized her. "Let me see that letter you were writing." "Ah, Etty, I couldn't do that." Her suspicions became certainties. "It's to another woman," she cried. "I know it. Why else should you hold it from me? Was it to your wife that you were writing? How am I to know that you are not a married man, you a stranger that nobody knows?" "I am not married, Etty. See now, I swear it. You're the only one woman on earth to me. By the cross of Christ, I swear it." He was so white with passionate earnestness that she could not but believe him. "Well then," she cried. "Well then," she cried, "why will you not show me the letter?" "I'll tell you, acushla," said he. "I'm under oath not to show it, and just as I wouldn't break my word to you, so I would keep it to those who hold my promise. It's the business of the lodge, and even to you it's a secret. And if I was scared when a hand fell on me, can't you understand it when it might have been the hand of a detective?" She felt that he was telling the truth. He gathered her into his arms and kissed away her fears and doubts. "Sit by me, then. It's a queer throne for such a queen, but it's the best your poor lover can find. He'll do better for you some of these days, I'm thinking. Now your mind is easy once again, is it not?" "How can it ever be at ease, Jack, when I know that you are a criminal among criminals, when I never know the day that I may hear you're in court for murder? McMurdo the Scourer, that's what one of the boarders called you yesterday. It went through my heart like a knife." "Sure, hard words break no bones." "But they were true." "Well, dear, it's not so bad as you think. We are but poor men that are trying in our own way to get our rights." Etty threw her arms around her lover's neck. "Give it up, Jack. For my sake, for God's sake, give it up. It was to ask you that I came here today. Oh, Jack, see, I beg it of you on my bended knees. Kneeling here before you, I implore you to give it up." He raised her and soothed her with her head against his breast. "Sure, my darling, you don't know what it is you're asking. How could I give it up when it would be to break my oath and to desert my comrades? If you could see how things stand with me, you could never ask it of me. Besides, if I wanted to, how could I do it? You don't suppose that the lodge would let a man go free with all its secrets?" "I've thought of that, Jack. I've planned it all. Father has saved some money. He is weary of this place, where the fear of these people darkens our lives. He is ready to go. We would fly together to Philadelphia or New York, where we would be safe from them." McMurdo laughed. "The lodge has a long arm. Do you think it could not stretch from here to Philadelphia or New York?"
"Well, then, to the West, or to England, or to Germany, where my father came from. Anywhere to get away from the Valley of Fear."
McMurdo thought of old Brother Morris. "Sure, it is the second time I've heard the valley so named," said he. "The shadow does indeed seem to lie heavy on some of you."
"It darkens every moment of our lives. Do you suppose that Ted Baldwin has ever forgiven us? If it were not that he fears you, what do you suppose our chances would be? If you saw the look in those dark, hungry eyes of his when they fall on me."
"By gar, I'd teach him better manners if I caught him at it. But see here, little girl, I can't leave here, I can't. Take that from me once and for all. But if you'll leave me to find my own way, I will try to prepare a way of getting honourably out of it."
"There is no honour in such a matter."
"Well, well, it's just how you look at it. But if you'll give me 6 months, I'll work it so that I can leave without being ashamed to look others in the face." The girl laughed with joy.
6 months!" she cried. "Is it a promise?"
Well, it may be 7 or 8, but within a year at the furthest we will leave the valley behind us." It was the most that Etty could obtain, and yet it was something. There was this distant light to illuminate the gloom of the immediate future. She returned to her father's house more light-hearted than she had ever been since Jack McMurdo had come into her life. It might be thought that as a member all the doings of the society would be told to him, but he was soon to discover that the organization was wider and more complex than the simple lodge. Even Boss McGinty was ignorant as to many things, for there was an official named the county delegate living at Hobson's Patch, farther down the line, who had power over several different lodges which he wielded in a sudden and arbitrary way. Only once did McMurdo see him, a sly little grey-haired rat of a man with a slinking gait and a sidelong glance which was charged with malice. Evans Pott was his name, and even the great boss of Vermissa felt towards him something of the repulsion and fear which the huge Danton may have felt for the puny but dangerous Robespierre. One day Scanlon, who was McMurdo's fellow boarder, received a note from McGinty enclosing one from Evans Pott, which informed him that he was sending over 2 good men, Lawler and Andrews, who had instructions to act in the neighbourhood, though it was best for the cause that no particulars as to their objects should be given. Would the bodymaster see to it that suitable arrangements be made for their lodgings and comfort until the time for action should arrive? McGinty added that it was impossible for anyone to remain secret at the Union House, and that therefore he would be obliged if McMurdo and Scanlon would put the strangers up for a few days in their boarding-house. The same evening the 2 men arrived, each carrying his gripsack. Lawler was an elderly man, shrewd, silent, and self-contained, clad in an old black frock-coat, which, with his soft felt hat and ragged grizzled beard, gave him a general resemblance to an itinerant preacher. His companion Andrews was little more than a boy, frank-faced and cheerful, with the breezy manner of one who is out for a holiday and means to enjoy every minute of it. Both men were total abstainers, and behaved in all ways as exemplary members of the society, with the one simple exception that they were assassins who had often proved themselves to be most capable instruments for this association of murder. Lawler had already carried out 14 commissions of the kind, and Andrews 3. They were, as McMurdo found, quite ready to converse about their deeds in the past, which they recounted with half-bashful pride of men who had done good and unselfish service for the community. They were reticent, however, as to the immediate job in hand.
"They chose us because neither I nor the boy here drink," Lawler explained. "They can count on us saying no more than we should. You must not take it amiss, but it is the orders of the county delegate that we obey."
"Sure, we are all in it together," said Scanlon, McMurdo's mate, as the 4 sat together at supper.
"That's true enough, and we'll talk till the cows come home of the killing of Charlie Williams or of Simon Bird or any other job in the past, but till the work is done we say nothing."
"There are half dozen about here that I have a word to say to," said McMurdo with an oath. "I suppose it isn't Jack Knox of Ironhill that you're after? I'd go some way to see him get his deserts."
No, it's not him yet.
Or Herman Strauss?
No, nor him either.
Well, if you won't tell us, we can't make you, but I'd be glad to know." Lawler smiled and shook his head. He was not to be drawn. In spite of the reticence of their guests, Scanlon and McMurdo were quite determined to be present at what they called the fun. When, therefore, at an early hour one morning, McMurdo heard them creeping down the stairs, he awakened Scanlon, and the two hurried on their clothes. When they were dressed, they found that the others had stolen out, leaving the door open behind them. It was not yet dawn, and by the light of the lamps they could see the two men some distance down the street.